Hello, everyone. You're listening to the Small Business Show. My name is Swire Ho. You can also call me the promo guy. My guest today is Geoffrey Klein from Nine Dots. Geoffrey, also known as Mr. Purple or the Story Guy, is a TEDx speaker, an adjunct professor and visual content producer, and author of the upcoming book, The Content Beast. He helps people and organizations communicate more effectively through the power of story. He currently serves as president and CEO of Nine Dots, a visual content company that helps businesses share their messages through visual communication to connect with their audience. Geoffrey's diverse professional experience include working in the film industry, where he worked on films such as The Truman Show, Mission Impossible 2, Legally Blonde, and Die Another Day. He also spent 10 years living in Manchester, England, where he worked in both real estate and creative design agencies. Welcome to the show, Geoffrey.
Thank you so much, Swire. Great to be here.
I watched your TEDx video, and I'm not going to give it away so listener can go check it out. Usually when you watch TEDx video, the first 15 seconds is very important. And then if you don't grab people's attention, they just stop it. So, but for Geoffrey's video, he made a compelling story in the first, I think, 10 seconds. Then it drew me to watch the entire video. So, Geoffrey, I wanted to get your take. Why do you think story is important? And in your work, how do you use story to help people to be better at what they do?
Thank you. The need to capture people's attention is really important in whatever business you're in. And in your business, having something that's going to be a conversation piece to engage people, we're all looking for that connection. And from my perspective, the shortest distance to connect to people is a story. That's the best way to communicate. And there's reasons behind it. In both my TEDx talk and in my book, I talk about the science of story. There's actual science that has been conducted to showcase why story is so powerful. And it really goes back to how our brains work. As human beings, we're hardwired to want stories, to engage with stories. They're more memorable. But at the end of the day, it's about that connection. It's not ironic that my company, Nine Dots, we talk about let's connect the dots. And story helps people do that. There's a lot of noise. I didn't come up, but I've popularized, from some people haven't heard, the term infobesity, which is, information overload. We're generating more content than ever before. There's more data and information than we could possibly handle. And so every business is looking for ways to kind of cut through that noise. And I believe the answer is to tell a story, because when you tell a story, there's actually something that happens in the brain. There rise in different kinds of hormones that will force people to then pay attention. And using now within what you started off talking about was the hook, something that's going to step right into the action so that people will want to be like, wait, what's going on? And so that's a method of how to tell a story that will engage people right off the bat.
Yeah, and then with your TEDx talk is something that unexpected. I thought that Jeff would talk about business and how you grow your business, but it's not completely that. So if you haven't listened to it, I'll suggest after this you should go check it out. So let me ask you this question. I actually have a really fun conversation with a contact of mine yesterday, and obviously it's around story matter for a brand. I was giving her the example that when I go to, let's say, Chamber of Commerce networking, what people would tell me is the entire story, even without me wanting to hear it. They just want to tell me how good I am, why we're the best, and things like that. On the other hand, on the other extreme, are brands that are so connected with the audience. They want to tell a story all about the audience. And the audience wonder, who is that behind this brand? Is there a person, or am I working with AI? So from your point of view, we are talking about two spectrum here. Why are they so different? And why do you say we should be kind of in the middle, or do we go to the extremes?
I have a very particular perspective on this, and it's more the latter, which is to focus on the audience. And the reason is that I think nobody really cares about what you do. And I tell that to businesses, like, what do you mean nobody cares about what I'm like? Nobody cares that you won an award. Nobody cares that you've been in business for this long. They only care about what you can do for them. It's that what's in it for me, WIIFM, which I talk about. If you're communicating a message to someone and it doesn't connect with anything that matters to them, they're going to check out. There's something over here that's going to resonate with them. And so I always believe that you should follow the 11th commandment. The 11th commandment is know thy audience. And I think it's really important to understand as best you can. And that's why there are a lot of tools to try and help people to get to understand who their audience is. And there are lots of ways to get that information, especially with digital media. But it's important. And I'll have a caveat on my perspective, which is if you're doing something and it's working, keep doing it. Because every business is slightly different. Every business has certain nuances. But what the data, what the experience I have and experience of many others is that when you start to tell people a story that's going to interest them, that's when they're going to pay attention. That's what's going to cut through. So there's kind of the threshold, which is, okay, you want to communicate effectively, we'll tell a story. And then, well, what's the story you should tell? It can be about your business, but if it doesn't connect to someone, your audience, your potential buyer, then it's not going to be effective. So I can tell a really funny story about this or that, but if at the end, if they're not interested if they don't get the point of why I'm telling this and how it relates to their business, then they're not going to go any further. They're just going to go, oh, that was nice.
So you think that, by a brand, right, a business, understand what my audience going through, like the pain point, why they should consider using a product, for example. So you think that would be good, and then they don't really care who is behind it, or like I'm thinking about examples that I do for I like gardening. So what I do is I follow people who are good at gardening, right? They have the YouTube channel, so they obviously provide all the content that I love to learn, but I also want to know who that person is, who is behind the person who is cooking my meal, who is, doing my gardening, who is maybe building the software that I do. Like, do you think like sometimes, especially for bigger businesses, we become like a faceless organization? So you're doing all the touch points, helping us, but when we actually reach out, like, are we talking to an AI? Are we talking to a human person? Do you think we should bring in the human part of it, or do you think just to focus on what the audience wants to learn about?
I'm glad you brought this up, because I think if you had only heard the first part of the conversation, you'd think, oh, just focus on the audience and it doesn't matter whether it's you or the next or the next. And I don't believe that. When I talk about story structure and how to tell a good business story, Aristotle back in 350 BC, known as kind of the godfather of narrative, we had a 3-act structure: a beginning, a middle, and the end. And so, although I think and obviously you have to start with the audience, whatever story you're telling, because if you don't capture their attention right away, then they're never going to listen to anything about you. So I think it's important that when you start with the audience, to capture that attention that's so critical. And then it's about, okay, so you identify what is it that matters to them, what's their pain, what's their problem. And then that second piece, that middle section, is kind of why and how are you going to help them? So that's when you start to talk about the differentiation of your business. How do you help solve that problem in a unique way? That's going to be like, oh, great. And then, I talk about the end of it, which is, and this is the impact, this is the transformation that's going to have. So you don't want to be a faceless brand. I think no one, but you look at brand, but if you think of the biggest brands, we know the ethos of certain brands, whether it's Nike or Apple, these brands, we have a very connection to them, but they're very clear about why they do what they do. And their why is linked to their customer, their audience. So I think it's not either or, it's about connecting those two things, about we know who you are. And we, as a result of knowing who you are, we have the way to help you be better, faster, whatever it may be. We can help you live a better life in whatever format. If you're looking to improve your business and you want to have more customers, we have a solution for you that's going to have an impact. And that's why you should pick us. Because from a brand perspective, I worked with a brand strategist and drank the Kool-Aid of brand. And for me, brand is, if your brand is, why is someone going to pick you as opposed to what's behind door number 2, I always say.
Hmm.
And I think it's about the fact that understanding and respecting the audience and your customer is critical. Everyone talks about being customer centric, but not everyone really lives it. And I think that's the difference, that at all those touch points, you need to be living your brand strategy, what makes you different, in a way that serves the people you want to help.
That's good. I've been waiting for this question. Can you give us a good example for using the story right? Can you give us a bad example for using the story
Yes.
wrong?
So I just referenced it in the beginning, middle, and end, but I came up with this formula, and there are different versions of it. This is my version. I call it the story pad, and you have the PAD is the beginning, middle, and end of your story. So the way to start is with the pain or problem of your customer or your audience. Then what's the solution, which is your product or service. And then a lot of people stop there. You have a product answer. And then the third part, which I think is really important, which is the D. So you have the problem and an answer. The D is the difference it makes, the impact. It's that transformation in your life or your business that's going to make you happy that you did this. So I'll give you an example when someone uses that well, and then just an example of how it's a mistake I think brands make. I'll start with the mistake. So you started to allude to it about like, doesn't the customer want to know who we are and what we do? So if you were to tell a story, you meet someone at a networking event, and they're like, what do you do? And you're like, our business has been around for 135 years, and we just won our 5th straight award. And I'm like, well, those things may matter, but not as a starting place.
Right.
That's credit. You got to get interest before you credibility is my feeling. And so I use the example often of personal injury attorneys. Now, I went to law school and I'm friends with lots of attorneys, and they have a horrible reputation as ambulance chambers. But generally speaking, I think their direct story makes a lot of sense. And their story goes very similar. You can see us on billboards, you can see us on TV commercials, and they're a little cheesy, but they're effective, and they're effective for a reason. They start with what? Have you been injured in an accident? Immediately going to, that's the pain point of their customer. Now, if I haven't been in an accident, or I don't know, I'm not going to be interested, and I'm going to move on. And for them, that's great. They don't want to waste time with me if I'm not a potential person. But if you have been injured in an accident, you're going to be like, yeah, I have. And that's how you hook them. You capture their attention. And then you go to the second part, the middle of the story, which is, here at Ho and Klein, we have fantastic legal services that can get you money or whatever it may be. And I go, great, I've been injured, and you can help me get the right care and money and all that. And then we end with the D, which is the difference it makes, which is, and when you work with us, we'll make you whole again, and you'll be able to live off and go into the sunset. I'm obviously, being a little lighthearted with it all, but the point being is that those 3 elements, when you put them in the right order, and you're focused on, you are talking about yourself in the middle section, because if you just went and said, have you been injured in an accident? Are you in pain? Great. Give us a call. If you don't share a little bit about how you're going to help them, that's not going to work. And there's a speaker friend of mine named James Ribalata, and that I've been sharing this distinction he makes, which I think is so important in business and in general, which is most of the time we think the goal of our messaging, of our whatever marketing we're doing, is to prove that we're good enough credibility. We're trying to establish credibility. And yes, you need to, you can't you can't expect that someone's going to hire you if they don't think you're credible. But for my money, I think what's more important than credibility is relatability. And that's why these stories work so well, because you're relating to that audience, you're relating to the customer, and you're connecting with them. You're saying, hey, I understand you, rather than I'm great, And it's by understanding and having that relatability that actually enables you to then get to the conversation of, and this is how I can help. Then you can share your credibility with them once you've made that connection. And I think that's the whole point of why stories are powerful, because they're the way that people connect.
I think you made a great example using personal injury attorney, and you're right. If they're not a ideal client, then by giving them that message, then people move on. A lot of us in marketing, we wanted to target everyone, but if they have no use for your service, why do you spend your money, even targeting them. So that's, you're right. It's very easy. Been injured? Are you hurt? Have you been mistreated at your workplace?
Right.
Then, like they list all their, the payment that they have, and then we can help you fight for your something, right?
Exactly.
So,
And you can then say, we've been in business for 50 years, helping people.
Yeah, and then you go
right
with
the wrongs.
once you know that they are interested, then you roll out the red carpet. These are, the features and benefits, but to get their attention when they're walking by, maybe, I don't know, maybe a soft drink company can say, "Are you thirsty?" "No, I'm not." "Okay, bye." And then, "Yeah, I am really." Then, like, "Have you heard of our drinks?" And, all the things. That is very interesting. I think that would be a great way, short and sweet, and then filter a lot of the ones that are not related. They're don't care at all about your service. But then for those of them who care, they'll go in and they'll ask why, and what can you do for me? And then
Right.
follow up with things that you have.
Yeah, and I think it's funny that you said, "What can you do for me?" It's part of that connecting with people is having a conversation. And I think one of the big shifts in marketing from the golden 50s or whatever it was a broadcast medium. It was, you think of traditional media, radio, TV, billboard, they're just shoving the message out there. We're now wanting to have conversations with brands. We want to be able to interact with the brands. And that's why social media and other elements of digital marketing enable us to say, "Hey, I like what you're doing," or, "Hey, can you answer this?" And once you get in that conversation, you're already along the way, and you have the opportunity to close that sale, to create that, engagement and that connection with someone that will lead, to get to know one another. And then they'll go, "Oh yeah, now I know you and you know me, and let's go and do business together."
Hmm. Yeah, that's a really good point. Like really small, but really, yeah, I got to pay more attention to the personal injury attorney because they're everywhere. They spend a lot of money, and then they're effective.
Well,
They're getting people pay.
I want to share one thing because you talked about like the middle section being features and benefits. And while I
Uh-huh.
think a lot of people talk about the features and benefits as a kind of context to what you do, I still think there's an opportunity to tell a story in the context of your features and benefits. And I'll tell you how
Hmm.
one way that I think is really powerful to do it. There's actually two stories that are really good for small businesses and really good for business in general, which is the testimonial and the case study, which are basically two sides of the same coin. And the reason they're really powerful, if you're showing a case study, is like, I had a customer who, had low engagement at their event,
Hmm.
and then we ended up having a conversation, and I got them these really interactive, fidget toys that had our brand on it. And then everyone was kind of really into them, and I interacted. We got it. So the way that and then they remembered them and they took them home and they played. So the fact is that the event people then, who are the customer, ended up having a better event because of our. And I'm giving just a silly example, but my point is that you can tell a story where you start with the pain of someone who you've already helped, and then show how what you have to offer helps them. Even better than that is a testimonial, because now it's not you saying we are great, it's someone else saying, "You know what, I had this real problem, with my taxes, and I didn't know what to do, and I got letters from the IRS, but thank goodness I found this great accountant, and they knew they're so smart and expertise, and all of a sudden I got money back." Like, so having someone else tell the story, because one of the things again about, we talked at the beginning about the audience is, who's the hero of your story? It's not the company, it's not the brand, it's the customer, it's the
Hmm.
person you've helped them get there. And if you go to story brand, you talk about the guide, you're the guide, but they're the one who's gone on the journey from where they started with a problem to where you've helped them solve it.
Yeah, I recently wrote about, from what I do in promotional product is you can actually help people to get a taste of the actual experience. Think about testing, right? Sampling at Costco, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you might not want to buy
I'm
a big old
familiar.
box of something, but then they're now cooking it, they're microwave and they're serving it. People are, chasing down, want to fight each other to have it. And you're able to get a little sample, right? You ate it. Wow, it tastes really good. And then you get like 4 boxes of it. So Think
I'm
about
guilty
that.
of that. So yes,
But
it's
I think
really,
that works, right? If they don't have that sampling station, you probably walk by, and especially for newer brand or brand they try to promote, then you don't get the taste of the little experience. Then you're not going to buy, the actual box.
yeah. And you bring up a point that I think is important to point out, which is part of the story that you tell will depend on where your prospect is in the buyer's journey. Meaning that if they're at the beginning of the journey, they're not familiar with your brand, they're in that awareness stage, you need to tell a story that's going to really capture their attention to learn more, as opposed to when they're further down the line. And also people ask me, well, how long should a video be? I'm like, well, there's some best practices about, if I just learned about your brand for the first time, I'm not watching a half an hour video. But if I'm, a logistics manager who's now, debating between two different suppliers to help me with my business, I might watch a 20-minute video from them because I really want
Yeah.
to get into the details of what they do. So I
Mhm.
think the story and the appetite and the investment in attention that someone's willing to give you does change depending on how well they've, how long they've been involved in the relationship. And it's like any other relationship. When you get to know someone better, then you're willing to help them out more. You're willing to invest time and energy. I don't think brands are any different. If you need to get the attention of them in the beginning to make sure that they're gonna, oh, what is that brand? Oh, that does taste good. Let me find out more. And then as you get deeper into that relationship, you're more likely to give them more time. And then, if they continue to provide answers to the problems that you have.
Yeah, I like how you leading the conversation. So the question that I have will be: it seems like you need a lot of video, right? So you will a brand will need to do video for prospect, right? They will also, if they're smart, do longer form video for the current client. So maybe to teach them, once you buy these tools or software, right? How can you use it better? So they have smart brand will have seminar, they will have workshops, right? Even sometimes they charge for the workshop, but for people who want to learn more about how to use that tool or software better, they actually go pay the conference. So you actually build that retention of the client because I know your software so well. I can do so much thing based on the expert lessons that I have. So like, how would you even advise a brand to do? Like, how should they focus on prospect and then recurring client? And then is there a formula for that? Like, what would you suggest?
Definitely. And I'm gonna you may think of my brother used to work for QVC for 20 years. And if you look at QVC's model, they have live TV where they're
Yeah.
demonstrating the problem and solution of a product. And so then you're like, oh, let me get that. And then you go, now actually, before you even go on, you can go on their digital side and learn more about it. And they'll have other videos, but then you get the product. Then they follow up with, here's a how-to video. Here. So it's not, the sale doesn't end when someone gets your product or service.
Mhm.
The after purchase is just as important. And I think that a lot of businesses miss out on nurturing that relationship with current customers. There's a lot of data showing it's, 6 times more difficult to get a new client than to keep a client, so
Mhm.
that you want to keep your clients happy. And so giving them those videos or whatever the content may be, whether it's, audio or video or a blog or an email, that's going to help them enhance their experience with your product or service. Because at the end of the day, I believe all of this is about customer experience. So what is the experience? Because if someone has a good customer experience, they'll come again. They'll talk about it. They'll
That's
share
where
it.
you get the
And
case study
so,
and testimonial from those happy customers.
exactly. Right. And that again, but you also have the, the lifetime value of a customer extends when they stay happy. We all know, people become loyal to a brand who continually treats them in a way that makes them feel good about the experience. And so in terms of telling those stories, I think, what I would suggest is, be thoughtful and plan first. So a lot of people are like, social media, I'll just post something, and then hope for the best. And I'm like, well, good luck. I think it's important to have a content plan, to know, okay, who's my audience? What is it that resonates with them? Let's think about how often we're gonna, consistency is really important. I was talking with someone else today. He's like, I'm like, oh, I really like some of the stuff you do on LinkedIn. And he's like, yeah, I'm not as consistent as I should be. Well, part of that is is having a plan and then nurturing your own plan. So I recommend to people is, okay, you start with your audience. What is the kind of content that you're going to create that's going to be meaningful to them? And that means something to you. I mean, you have to have, you can't just fake content. I think that's a bad idea. But and then you come up with some content pillars or buckets of what things that you do. And you'll see, whether I like to share quotes and, I share my marketing dad jokes and things like that, you share on a consistent basis. But I don't just do it haphazardly. What I do is I think it's about batching and scheduling. So from a very tactical perspective is, okay, if you know some kind of content you're going to create, product videos, you have a bunch of different products you like. So you're going to showcase, trending product, so every first Friday of the month, you're going to have a new trending product. So you may need to, you may have some of those that are coming. So you might be able to do those a couple of weeks in advance, a couple of months in advance. And the idea is a distinction I make in my book is the difference between, you've heard of evergreen content. Sure, we've all heard of evergreen. Well, evergreen content is content that should work today and should work tomorrow and should work next year. And I always use the example like Thanksgiving is the same time every year. And if you're going to create a little video to share Thanksgiving with people, generally speaking, that should be good today. This Thanksgiving, next Thanksgiving, the Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving's not changing a whole lot. And then there's the other kind, and I've given it a name, which is, so you have evergreen and then what I call fresh cut content. And fresh cut content is stuff that's now, so it may not be good, when a week goes by. So if you think of events, someone dies,
like breaking news,
celebrity dies, exactly. Fresh cut is like breaking news of your business. And it may be maybe of something in the news, in the zeitgeist that's happening, but it's the type of thing where you have to be agile enough to step on it. And you see a lot of these when something happens in the news and then people make a bunch of spoof videos, and I'm amazed at how fast they do these.
Yeah.
But the point is that if you have planned out well and you have content coming out regularly and consistently, and then you thread in the fresh cut content, then you've got a nice, robust content menu for people to consume. I talk about, feeding the content beast. So this is your way. You can feed the beast. And this way, he's getting fed regularly. And then every time you're giving him a treat with that fresh cut content, like, oh, here's something for you now. And so I think the best way to think about it is figure out, get to know your audience first, then start creating content you think that will resonate. And then I came up with which is ERA, and I'm not a baseball player. The ERA is a term in baseball, but it's about experiment, review, and adjust. And so whatever you're doing, it's about making sure that you don't just, okay, I've created content, I've thrown all there, and then I'll go to sleep. No, you have to actually look at the data and see who's engaging, and then adjust. So you may say video is great, and so I worked with a client once, and we were doing a bunch of traditional media, a bunch of digital media, and we were tracking everything to see what was responding to that customer group, to that audience, and how much do we spend to reach them. And we learned from keeping track of that actually direct mail was pretty powerful because they were an older group of people. And so they were responding because they're getting postcards and they're putting it on there, and it was for home services. So that was in the home and things, and so I think it depends on your product, and then you got to test, I always joke that marketing is part art and part science, and the science requires experimentation. So that's why you experiment, not just experiment, then look at the results. That's the review. And then you go, okay, now let me adjust this way. So if you know that a particular type of content is getting a lot more engagement, make more of that. You got to let the market tell you. You can't fall in love with something and expect, and it doesn't perform. You got to, detach yourself from it in order to be successful. I was talking with the president of digitalmarketer.com, Mark DeGrasse, and he was saying, the biggest problem that brands have is they're attached, their ego. They got to let go of their ego because they're in love with an idea. And the market's saying, we don't give a crap about that idea. We're like, no, it's such a good idea. It's such a good idea. And so I think it's important to realize, let your audience tell you what they like. And in fact, some brands, and some both professional personal brands and business brands ask, hey, audience, what kind of content would you like to see more of? And while there are studies done and a lot of it points to video, that's the kind of content people want to see more of from brands, you can't just make assumptions. You have to experiment. You have to review what's working, what's not working, and then adjust accordingly.
Yeah, there's a lot of good point there, Jeffrey. And for my so obviously if you listen to the Small Business Show right now, and if you have any content or guest suggestion, reach out to me. So uh, for my own posting on social media too, sometimes I would spend a lot of time writing what I think would be a good blog article that is changing the industry. That's so I think. But when I posted it, there's no engagement. But I realized that sometimes when I take pictures of me doing stuff, or when I am at a networking event, just take a picture of myself, people actually respond to that. So I'm actually experimenting. Would still mix in those content, but with me as a picture, so I cannot grab people's attention. Who's this guy and what is he doing now? So, and then you look at the word section, and then I kind of lead you to where I want you to go. So I think for my business, that can actually work better. I'm so glad that you mentioned the example. So if you're a brand who spend like hours and hours creating something, and you post it the way that you want to post on there, and there's no engagement, maybe change it up a little bit. Maybe really go back to your feed if you're reading all the data to see which posts or what kind of format or time that are most engaging. So maybe do more of that and see, do an experiment, and don't change it all at once. Maybe do a little changes every time to see and take notes of what works best for your brand.
Yeah, and there's two things I want to point out. One was something you said way slightly early in the conversation. People are like, "Are you into B2B or B2C?" And I can't remember where I first heard this, but they said, "No, I'm H to H, human to human." And I love that about business. We get so caught up in like that. Everyone who's buying from you is a person, and so
Mhm.
I think when you say people are resonating to seeing photo, we resonate with that. I found the same thing in my experience where I have all these what I think are amazingly cool little animations, and I'm like, no one's paying attention, and then I'm at a picture at an event with someone, and I get a lot of engagement.
Yeah.
So I think and again, so it's not like I abandon the other stuff because I think there's an audience for it. I also find, people will tell me, "Oh, I liked your post." I'm like, well, I wouldn't have known that if I hadn't happened to bump into you. So there are people who are seeing it even though they're not taking that action. And so then the question becomes, how can we engage them? One of the things that I like to do is ask questions, in your post. So the call to action isn't go to my website. It's, tell me an experience of yours. So
Mm.
again, you're relating it to the person who's reading it. What do you think? What's your favorite? Blah 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 blah. What was the best? For you, what's the best? Promo, item you've ever had? I'll just post that. And have a video. Hey, I saw promo. Do you like bottles or sticky notes or or is it little squishy guys? Like, tell me, because people again like to talk about themselves, and so that's a way of asking them the question.
Yeah, and I like your idea that maybe, let's say on Wednesday, I post the trend because people do love to learn about the trend, but they don't want to see it
Right,
all the time. So maybe they're getting used to, Swai will post the latest trend, let's say on Wednesday at I pick a time like at 1 p.m.
right,
So maybe I could actually create a anticipation, right? What is he going to post for this week at 1
exactly.
p.m.? So that's actually a good idea because
Yep.
I think about we're actually streaming on Twitch right now. When people going on Twitch, they're actually waiting for their favorite
Right.
streamer to be on at the same
Hmm.
time. If the person is not on, that's a big trouble. But then they actually create that anticipation. That's a great idea, Jeff. I think that
I'm
I
going to give you
extract
one
from.
little. I'm going to add to it for 1 second, which is I
Uh-huh.
think you want to brand it, and
Mm.
by that I mean instead of saying, "Oh, every Wednesday I'm going to put something," maybe you make it trending Tuesday.
Make
So
a
trending
hashtag out
Tuesday.
of it too.
Exactly. Make a hashtag out of it and you make
Mm.
it its unique thing so that people now not only know it, they know how to, it's framed for them. So you're framing it in a way that they're like, oh, and that becomes your content pillar. Trending Tuesday
Mm.
or, or, Wizard Wednesday, whatever you end up deciding what, but something that's catchy and easy for people to remember. And again, you're now saying, hey, if you're interested in trending things, they know, oh, wait, Trending Tuesday's coming. what's why you're showing. And so then again, you get with that consistency, people that, as you said, there's that anticipation. They're like, oh, and then you archive them in a place where they can go and see all of them. And then so one other thing I want to say was that sometimes you post content that doesn't work, and I think too many businesses are fall victim to the one and done, meaning they post it once, no one responds, they're like, it's a failure. And the reality is the way the algorithms and the way, someone, and this is a couple of years old, there was a piece of data that said at any given point, when someone goes on to Facebook, there are 200,000 pieces of content they could see.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, you can't see all that content. So meaning that when you post something, only a small fraction of people may see it, which is why you may want to post it again. So I think people are like, oh, I've already posted it once. Well, it's, and then my friend Annie Schiffman, she learned this thing from her dad, and this is in my book, which I think is a great concept, which is play the hits. So we're always struggling to come up with new ideas and new content. Repurpose the content that's already performed well. So if you had an interview with someone and it went really well and people were really engaged with it, you can be like, from the Small Business Show archives, and showing a little clip with a link to the show. So that it's like, oh, this was, because no one may be seeing the show. They may not see it when you post it. It may be a year from now, and it's still good content that people want to share. So repurposing things, playing those hits, I think is a really important thing.
Yeah, I actually do notice it. There are shows that, was out for maybe a couple of months, and then, like for like you, Geoffrey, when, your book come out, then obviously you're going to promote it. Like people are going to start looking you up, and then they might stumble on, the conversation that we have today. So I really like that. Or it becomes trendy, or maybe the topics become, a heated debate right now. So that would be actually a good time if you already have the content in your Rolodex, using the old term word. Then you can actually use
you
that.
have these assets. Don't wait. You spent time and energy creating or curating or however, designing something to show it just once. If you really believe it's a good piece of content, don't hoard it. Share it every now and again. I think people, and then which is why I like the whole idea of the content of Throwback Thursdays. That whole idea is like, hey, remember, people are nostalgic, so there's an element of like, hey, I saw someone, a friend of mine, Ashley, who's been in her business I think for 7 years, and she had a photo of her from when she started and a photo from her today.
Ooh.
And then a nice blog,
Uh-huh.
nice content about the journey, the 7-year journey. So I think there's an opportunity for people to dip into what the past and share it again.
And that's a
Sometimes
good
it's
story
updating
too.
it,
Like people
sometimes
want to know, like now, like you've been in it
yeah,
for so long. Like, what did you learn? And then you could, if you're
right.
smart, then you create very good content. People get to know you better.
Yeah, and it's a way of sharing that information about yourself without being, I've been in business for 10 years. No. You can say 10 years ago when I started, and there's a story behind it. Why did you start your business? I think these are things of ways that people are genuinely interested in things more than we think. And it's just about finding out what is that interest to this group and share that. And I think that's, and again, that human to human, the personal stories about your business actually matter, not about, oh, I've, sold this much, or I've had this many products, and and the other thing I'll say is that warts and all, and by that I mean where social media has become this perfectly polished perspective of everything, and everyone shows themselves in the most buttoned up and perfect way, and that's not reality. And I think that content that performs well is when you share the less positive parts of what happened, reality. And I loved Gary Vaynerchuk, who I'm a fan of. He talked about like creating content, and one of the things he says is, don't create, document. And I think that there's an element for creation, but what he means is people like to see behind the scenes, see the journey, see the struggles. And so if you're figuring out, I don't know what kind of content to share, well, what's going on in your business right now? Share that. whether it's a stack of products that are up there, or it's you just met with a client, or you're can't handle the heat, whatever, and it's melting your whatever. I think the thing is that it's not, you don't need to be perfect, you need to be real, and that's the thing that human to human is about. Sometimes being vulnerable can be super powerful, because and the reason is because it's authentic. And I
Mhm.
think at the end of the day, being authentic is super important for brands, because our radar for BS is so high. And then if you end up doing something inauthentic, the consequences can be pretty horrible, to the point where there's a statistic that it takes one, if you have one bad brand experience, it takes 12 good ones to make up for it.
I think that that's true to that. Like and plus, an unhappy customer will tell everyone about what you just did, versus a happy customer might be happy, but they're not going to tell anyone their experience. So think about that before take your course of action.
Right. You're trying to create brand advocates. You're going to go out there and say, "Oh my God, I just had the best fill in the blank of what you do." Yeah, word of mouth is still the most powerful tool in any business.
It
And it's
is.
something you can't control completely, but you can certainly do things to help yourself out.
Yeah. So, Jeffrey, for listener who have individual questions or just want to figure out what's the best story they should tell their customer, what would be a good way to reach out to you? And can you talk about your upcoming book a little bit?
Sure. So the best way to get in touch with me is probably through LinkedIn or my email. It's which is on my LinkedIn profile. I think my email, so it's Jeffrey@9dotsmedia.com, or through all the different socials. You can DM me. GG Klein is my handle for most things. Or they can reach out to you, and then they can reach out, and you and I can connect them. My book is been a labor of love, as any book has. I'm really proud of it. It's not quite finished. I finished the writing and editing. It's just going into layout now. But I created a landing page called thecontentbeast.co. It's called The Content Beast. And part of the reason is because I tell people, if you're in business, you've got a beast to feed. You have to feed the beast because of all the things we talked about. And so the Content Beast is 4 parts. It's why do you need to feed the beast, who you're really feeding, what to feed them, and how to do it. And so it should be coming out mid-October. But if you go to thecontentbeast.co now, there's a little form you can fill in, and you'll get notified when the book is available. And so that's probably the best way. But yes, the Content Beast is coming. That's what I've been saying. So if you go, coming soon, the Content Beast, don't forget to feed the beast, because who's hungry? The Content Beast.
That's great. I'll include all the show notes to connect with Jeffrey. Thank you so much for coming on today. You gave me some good homeworks, and I'm definitely going to do them.
Swire, this has been a real pleasure. I appreciate being here, and thank you very much.
All right.